Okay, and I've got Steve Kendall here on the line, who's going to talk to us about the history of the Great Barrier Island out here Island Place. And look, Steve, I wanted to talk to you because I'm told you were right there when this building got first put together. And please don't be put off by our town visitor calling it just the garage shed converted. I think it's a wonderful space and the kids are greatly enjoying. It's painted in all colours that you can imagine with posters and everything on the wall. So it's looking really good.
Yes, I haven't been there for a few years, but I'm sure it's looking just as good as it always did. And it was a cheap building at the time, but it was much better than what we had. When we first arrived here, Jen and I first arrived here in '82, the play centre was functioning then, but it was in a very run-down, rat-infested old building, which was an ex-classroom, I think, a relocatable classroom. It was on the ground where the community gardens is now. And Jen had been in play centre in town, so she was keen to get stuck in again. We had an 18-month-old son then, just one of them. And she went along and got involved, and it was good. It was a good functioning little play centre. But as I said, the building was run down, and they applied to the Play Centre Association for funding to replace it. And we got that tin building, that converted garage. I think it's actually a Skyline Cottage, it was called at the time. And it was put up by Murray Dunnett in about probably 84, 85, somewhere around there.
And tell me, the play centre at the time, who was involved? I mean, how many parents, how many children were on the island? Because I believe in those days there were more children on the island than there are now. Is that true?
Quite possibly. I think there was less people. I got an idea there was about 400 or 500 people when we came to the island back then, but they were all, well, a lot of them were young families like us, either the old settler farmer families or young folk like us who'd escaped the city and come to the barrier, and they were living in huts in the bush and all over the place, and they all had kids. And so I think the play centre was quite thriving. I don't know the numbers, but I can remember a lot of the names. The same faces are still about, of course, but they're greyer and older and wiser now.
And so the play centre at the time, when you first moved into its current location just past Kaitoke School, how was it set up? What did it look like, and what did you do there?
Well, to go back and tell the full story, the play centre, was, like I say, was on that ground where the community gardens is now, and it was a good site, but they were short of water, always short of water, and there was no disposal field for the effluent there. They just had a long drop, and every summer the campers would come through while play centre was closed, and they'd take all the water and they'd fill the long drop to overflowing. So the ladies always had a hell of a mess to deal with when they came back. So then when Kaitoke School opened in about, I think it was 88 or 89 that opened, I was on the board of trustees there, and the idea came up that we shift the play centre onto the school grounds. The school had the infrastructure there to support the play centre. They had power, they had water, plenty of both, and they had a disposal field. So it was quite a good fit. The board of trustees very generously agreed to have the play centre on, although I think it's a great idea to try and integrate your education establishments. And then the Play Centre Association came up with the money for the shift, and I got the contract to uplift the building from its site at the community garden site there, and tow it down to Kaitoke and put it on new foundations at the school where it is. And after I'd done that, I added on the toilet block out the back and the was storeroom. I think it's an office now, from what an earlier person was saying, and the deck out the front. And yeah, that happened probably around 1990. I can't remember exactly.
Now that takes us back well over 20 years now by my count.
Yes, it must have been good 20 years. Yeah.
Okay, and that takes, obviously, your children have grown up and have gone their way.
Yes.
But is the sense, well, firstly, how old was the play centre? How long had the play centre been running by the time you got involved?
I'm not sure, actually. And when we arrived in '82, it was certainly a functioning play centre. I don't know that they had as many facilities. Well, they certainly didn't have as many facilities in the way of toys and equipment that they do now. And what the level of funding they got from the North Shore Play Centre Association was, I don't know. Jenny, my wife, might have a better idea of that. But there was probably, I'd say, there was upwards of a dozen mothers plus children, and their children, 1, 2 or 3 children, whatever they had, would go along. It was quite a busy little place. Of course, the play centre, it probably still is, but in those days it was a social outing for the women as much as anything. If the roads weren't so good there, and people they'd come out once a week, quite often, from wherever they lived, and they'd do their shopping and go to play centre and then disappear back into the bush for another week.
Now, I still know, even now, there's I know there's people that have to actually walk out. There's Andrew that comes to Mulberry Grove School by having to walk out all the way from Moresley Bay.
Right.
Was there other stories like that where people actually had to just walk their way to play centre? Yeah, well,
there was I know that some of the ladies from around Allen Bay would walk out or kayak or dinghy out. And, of course, there was the remoter parts of Schooner Bay and Rosalie Bay, as you say. The roads were nowhere near as good then as what they are now. And so, it was usually quite a mission to get out. So, play centre would be a highlight a week for the women because they could socialise with other women, and for the kids because they would see other kids.
Now, we here on the Barrier, we always like to sort of just note the differences from our cousins in town. Do you think that the play centre at the time represent a different way of doing things from the way it would have been done in town?
Yes, I imagine it would be, just simply because of the setup that we had over here. We had no power for a start. There was no power in the original building. There was no power in that tin building when it first got set up. There may have been a portable generator, but of course it wasn't running all the time. There was no readily available power all the time like there is now. No inverters or battery systems. So it would have been quite different, I'm sure. It would have certainly had a distinctive Barrier flavour.
Now, so tenders in the bulletin that the old building is up for sale.
Yeah.
Do you think somebody actually could pick up the whole building and make something new out of it one more time?
I'm sure they could. The only thing they might have to do is the addition that I put on on the road side, which was that was added on once the tin building was in place. So you might have to disconnect that and just take the tin building and then the other bits separately. Although a decent trailer would get underneath, and you'd need some big beams to carry the whole thing. It was quite an undertaking shifting the building. I remember that it was good. It was a lot of people on the island were very helpful. Ted Scott especially was great. He had the trailer and he had the cores and he had the jacks. He'd been doing some house moving in town, so he was a great one. He gave me lots of advice and lots of gear to do it.
Well, it sounds like if anybody is out there with a project in mind for it, then we can learn from experience and get some tips from you how to make room for the new play centre that is going to be built there.
Yes, it'd be a shame just to see the building knocked over, but I guess the limiting factor there is having a trailer on the island that'll fit underneath it, and the grader tows it very well. The grader's a great towing machine for it because the grader's very manoeuvrable too, so that was what we used.
Okay, well, there's a project waiting to go. Thank you very much, Steve, for just giving us a bit of a picture on the history of the play centre.
Oh, you're welcome, Ed.
And I'm sure that there's still a few generations to come that will pass through the play centre.
Oh, yes, yeah. Well, the play centre is a great educational establishment. But I think what makes them very special is the fact that the parents are involved there, because the mothers, especially the mothers, but the fathers have an opportunity too. That the mothers get a chance to learn themselves. They're required to do courses because they need certain points to function. And, it's a learning curve for the kids and the parents.
Oh, well, on that note, thank you very much, Steve, for talking to us today.
Oh, you're welcome.
And I'll now switch back to a little bit more music, and then I've actually got another set of interviews ready to go.
Okay.
Stand by for that. Thank you, Steve.
All right, see ya.